Imagine this. It's just another quiet night on a deserted highway, the kind where the only sound is the hum of your engine and the occasional flicker of streetlights passing overhead. Officer Daniel Riggs has seen it all. Routine stops, reckless drivers, the usual excuses. But tonight? Tonight is different. Because when he flips on his sirens to pull over a speeding nurse, he has no idea he's about to step into a nightmare that will leave him questioning everything. The moment he approaches her window, his instincts scream that something is terribly wrong. Her hands are shaking, her eyes wide with sheer terror, and what she whispers to him chills him to the bone. This isn't just a traffic stop. This is a race against time. Now, I know you're here because you love stories that grip you from the first second, the kind that make your heart pound and your mind race, desperate for answers. Well, buckle up, because this one will leave you breathless. By the end of this video, you'll get every shocking detail of what really happened that night. The secrets, the twists, the life-or-death stakes that turned a routine stop into something straight out of a thriller. And trust me, you won't see the truth coming. Let's talk about the two people at the center of this mystery. First, there's Officer Riggs, a seasoned cop who thought he'd seen it all until this night. Then there's Emily Carter, the nurse behind the wheel, a woman who's spent her life saving others but is now fighting to save herself. What could make a nurse, someone who's sworn to protect lives, break every traffic law in a desperate attempt to outrun the law? What was so urgent that she couldn't stop, couldn't slow down, even with flashing lights in her rear view? Here's where things get even more intense. Because when Riggs leans in, expecting the usual excuses, what Emily says next changes everything. It's not a plea for mercy. It's not a sob story. It's four words that send a jolt of adrenaline straight through him. And in that moment, he realizes this isn't just about a speeding ticket. This is about survival. Now, I know what you're thinking. What did she say? What could possibly make a hardened officer freeze in his tracks? Was she running from someone? Hiding something? Or was there something far darker in that car with her? You're about to find out. But I'll warn you now, once you hear the truth, you'll never look at a traffic stop the same way again. Because here's the thing, this story isn't just about a cop and a nurse. It's about the split-second decisions that define us, the secrets we carry, and the moments when ordinary people are forced to do the unthinkable. And as the pieces start falling into place, you'll realize nothing about this night was what it seemed. So tell me, are you ready to uncover the truth? To step into that patrol car, to hear those four chilling words, to witness the heart-stopping discovery that turned this routine stop into a night no one would ever forget? Then don't you dare look away. Because what happens next will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. Officer Daniel Riggs had spent the last 10 years patrolling these quiet stretches of highway, where the most excitement he usually encountered was a drunk driver or the occasional speeder with a lead foot. But tonight, as his cruiser's headlights cut through the darkness, something felt off, an unshakable tension in the air, the kind that prickles the back of your neck when you know, deep down, that things are about to go sideways. He hadn't expected much when he clocked the sedan doing 90 in a 55, just another reckless soul in a hurry. But then he got closer. The way the car weaved, not like someone texting or drunk, but like someone terrified. And when his spotlight hit the rearview, he caught a glimpse of the driver's face, wide-eyed, pale, her knuckles white on the wheel. This wasn't just someone running late. This was someone running for their life. Emily Carter wasn't supposed to be on this road. Not tonight. Not like this. She had just finished a double shift at Mercy General, where the ER had been a war zone. Car accidents, a code blue, the usual chaos of a Friday night. Her co-workers would later say she seemed off, distracted, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. But no one asked why. No one noticed the way her hands trembled when she clocked out, or how she kept glancing over her shoulder in the parking lot. If they had, maybe someone would have stopped her. Maybe they would have seen the fear in her eyes before she peeled out of the lot like the devil himself was on her tail. But no one did. And now, as Officer Riggs approached her window, the truth was about to come crashing down, one way or another. The thing about small towns is everyone knows everyone. And in Crestwood, Emily was the kind of person people trusted, a nurse who'd held the hands of dying patients, a volunteer at the local shelter, the kind of woman who brought casseroles to grieving families. So, what could have driven her to this? That's the question Riggs couldn't shake as he motioned for her to roll down the window. Was it drugs? A mental break? Or something worse? Because the way she was acting, the frantic glances at her back seat, the way her voice cracked when she finally spoke, it wasn't the behavior of someone who'd just had a bad day. It was the behavior of someone who knew, with absolute certainty, that they were in mortal danger. And then there were the rumors. The kind whispered in hospital break rooms and diner booths after too many coffees. About Emily's ex, a man with a temper and a habit of showing up unannounced. About the shady new orderly at the hospital who always seemed to be watching her. About the patient who'd coded under her care last week, a man with connections no one liked to talk about. Were these just small-town gossip, or were they pieces of a puzzle Riggs was only now starting to see? Because as Emily finally lowered her window, her first words weren't, "I'm sorry, officer." They weren't even about the speed. They were a plea, raw, desperate, the kind that haunts a cop long after his shift ends. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the idling engine. "You have to help me. He's in the trunk." The words hit Riggs like a punch to the gut. He'd heard a lot of wild excuses over the years, but this was different. Because Emily wasn't lying. He could see it in her face, in the way her breath came in shallow gasps, like she was 1 second from screaming. But before he could react, before he could even process what she'd just said, his radio crackled to life. A bolo for a white sedan, last seen fleeing the scene of a shooting downtown. And the license plate number? It matched the one right in front of him. Now the pieces were falling into place, but not in any way that made sense. Because if Emily was running from something or someone, what did that have to do with a shooting miles away? Was she a victim? A witness? Or something else entirely? And more importantly, who the hell was in her trunk? Riggs' hand instinctively went to his sidearm, his mind racing. He'd trained for this. He'd prepared for shootouts, for high-speed chases, for every worst-case scenario they drilled into him at the academy. But this was something no training could have prepared him for. Because in the split second it took for Emily's eyes to flick to the back seat again, Riggs realized one horrifying truth. Whatever was happening here, it was far from over. And the next move he made could mean the difference between life and death. For both of them, as Officer Riggs' fingers brushed the cold metal of his sidearm, his mind raced faster than the cruiser's engine. The bolo alert ringing in his ears didn't match the woman in front of him. Emily wasn't some hardened criminal. She was a nurse, for God's sake. But the terror in her eyes was real, and that whisper, *keys in the trunk*, wasn't something anyone just made up. Before he could demand answers, his radio erupted again, this time with the dispatcher's urgent update. Shooting victim identified as Marcus Valles, 34, known associate of the Rivera cartel. Riggs' blood ran cold. The Riveras didn't just operate in Crestwood. They owned half the cops, half the city council. If Emily was tangled up with them, this wasn't just dangerous, it was suicide. But then, as if the night couldn't get any more twisted, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A single grainy photo, a hospital security feed time-stamped an hour ago, showing Emily in the parking lot, but not alone. A figure in a hoodie gripped her arm, shoving something into her hands before vanishing into the shadows. The message underneath was even more chilling. Tell her to run faster. They're coming. Who sent this? A friend? A threat? And why did that hoodie look eerily familiar? Like the one worn by Jake Tolbert, the hospital's disgraced orderly fired last month for stealing meds. Tolbert had been seen arguing with Emily the day before he was let go, but she'd brushed it off as nothing. Now Riggs wasn't so sure. Meanwhile, across town, Emily's best friend, Lena Rodriguez, was jolted awake by her own phone lighting up with a voicemail, a distorted voice hissing, "You saw nothing at the warehouse. Keep your mouth shut, or the nurse dies next." Lena's stomach dropped. The warehouse. That's where she'd seen Emily 2 nights ago. pale and shaking, clutching a blood-stained duffel bag. When Lena had asked, Emily swore her to secrecy, muttering something about a patient who'd left something behind. Now. With this threat, Lena realized Emily hadn't been lying to protect herself. She'd been lying to protect her. But from who? The Riveras? The cops? Or someone else entirely? Back on the highway, Riggs made his decision. He couldn't call this in, not yet. Not with half the department on the Rivera payroll. Instead, he yanked open Emily's door and barked, "Drive.
Now.
Follow my lights, and don't stop for anything." As she slammed the gas, Riggs radioed in a fake location, sending backup in the opposite direction. He didn't know if she was innocent or guilty, but one thing was certain, whatever was in that trunk, whoever was hunting her, they were both in way over their heads. And as Emily's rearview mirror caught the glint of headlights speeding toward them, headlights that definitely weren't police, Riggs realized the horrifying truth. They weren't just being followed. They were being herded. The moment Emily's tires screeched onto the abandoned service road, Riggs' cruiser tight on her bumper, the truth hit her like a sucker punch to the ribs. This wasn't just about the body in the trunk. This wasn't even about the Riveras. The real nightmare had started 3 days ago, in the sterile glow of Mercy General's morgue, when she'd lifted the sheet covering John Doe number 42 and saw his face. The face of a man who'd supposedly died in a car crash 10 years ago. Her brother. The memory tore through her now, sharp as broken glass. She'd recognized him instantly, despite the scars, despite the years. The same crooked smile frozen in death. The same military tattoo on his wrist, faded but unmistakable. The coroner had shrugged, said the body was a homeless vet from a shelter intake, but Emily knew better. Because her brother hadn't died in that crash. He'd disappeared after texting her one cryptic message. "They made me see. Don't trust the badge." She'd thought it was PTSD talking. He'd come back from deployment different, paranoid. But now? Now his corpse was in her trunk, and the men hunting her weren't cartel. They were wearing FBI jackets. Riggs saw the realization dawn on Emily's face as she white-knuckled the wheel. "You knew that body," he growled. Not a question, but an accusation. The pieces were snapping together now. The way she'd flinched when he'd mentioned the bolo, the hospital security photo of her taking something from that hooded figure. It wasn't drugs. It was a key. The same key now burning a hole in her pocket, the one her brother had hidden inside his boot before they pumped him full of bullets in that morgue cooler. Then came the voice neither expected, a crackling transmission cutting through Riggs' police radio. "Daniel? It's Lena. You need to listen." Static swallowed her next words, but the desperation was clear. Lena wasn't just Emily's friend. She was Riggs' cousin, their connection buried so deep even Emily hadn't known. And she was screaming something about a warehouse security feed, about men in tactical gear loading bodies into unmarked vans. About a symbol spray-painted on the wall, the same damn symbol etched into John Doe number 42's dog tags. Emily's breath came in ragged bursts. Her brother had tried to warn her. The badge Riggs wore? It meant nothing. The real monsters weren't criminals. They were the ones who'd staged his death a decade ago, the ones who'd just executed him in cold blood for getting too close to whatever was hidden at that warehouse. And now, as headlights crested the hill behind them, not cop cars, not cartel, but black SUVs with no plates, Riggs made a choice that would split their world in two. He drew his gun. But instead of aiming at Emily, he leveled it at the approaching vehicles and snarled, "You drive. I'll cover you." Because the photo Lena had just sent changed everything. There, amidst the warehouse carnage, stood a man Riggs would have taken a bullet for yesterday. His captain. Smiling beside a body bag. And taped to the inside? A fresh hospital bracelet with Emily's name on it. The black SUVs screeched to a halt in a half-circle around them, doors flying open before the vehicles even fully stopped. Riggs' finger hovered over the trigger, his mind screaming that this was a trap. But whose? The men spilling out weren't FBI, despite the vests. They moved like soldiers, their rifles trained with cold precision, and in that split second, Riggs knew two things. He was outgunned, and the captain's betrayal went deeper than he could have imagined. Then the passenger door of the lead SUV opened, and the breath left Riggs' lungs like he'd been kicked. His older brother, Jason, declared Kia in Afghanistan 8 years ago, stepped out in full tactical gear, his face a mask of grim recognition. The world tilted. Jason was alive. Jason was here. And the way his squad raised their weapons, not at Riggs, but at Emily, told him this reunion wasn't an accident. "You were never supposed to see this," Jason said, his voice hollow, like something had been carved out of him. "Walk away now, Danny. She's already dead." The words hit Riggs like shrapnel. His brother wasn't just alive. He was part of whatever nightmare had started with Emily's brother in that morgue. The duffel bag, the warehouse, the hospital bracelet, it all led back to something so big, they'd faked deaths to bury it. Emily's hand clamped around Riggs' wrist, her nails drawing blood. "The key," she whispered, raw with terror. "They'll kill millions for it." He didn't understand, not yet, but the desperation in her eyes mirrored the churn in his gut. That key wasn't just evidence. It was a countdown. Somewhere in the city, something was ticking, and the only person who knew how to stop it was the corpse in the trunk. Then Jason's radio crackled, a voice Riggs recognized as the police chief's, barking orders to contain the leak. The realization was a knife to the ribs. The entire department was in on it. Every badge he'd ever trusted. Every oath he'd sworn. And now Jason was stepping closer, his rifle lowering just enough to aim at Riggs' chest. "Last chance, little brother." The plea in his voice was worse than the gun. "Walk
away."
Riggs' grip on his own weapon wavered. He could surrender Emily, let whatever horror was coming play out, and live with the lie. Or he could do the unthinkable, turn his gun on his own flesh and blood, the brother he'd mourned, the ghost now staring him down. Emily's breath was ragged against his shoulder. "They injected him with it," she choked out. "Your brother. My brother. All of them. That's why they had to die." Injected him with what? The question burned, but the SUV's engines revved, cutting off any answer. Time was up. Jason's finger tightened on the trigger. And Riggs, caught between blood and duty, between the brother he'd lost and the woman who held the end of the world in her shaking hands, made his choice. The gunshot shattered the night. But whose finger had pulled the trigger? The answer would change everything. The gunshot echoed like a thunderclap, but it wasn't Riggs who fired. It was Lena, crouched behind the open door of a wrecked sedan 20 yards back, her service weapon smoking. The bullet struck Jason's rifle, sending it clattering to the pavement, but before anyone could react, the night exploded into chaos. More gunfire erupted from the tree line. Not Jason's squad, but a new wave of attackers in unmarked black fatigues, their faces obscured by infrared goggles. They moved like shadows, cutting down Jason's men with terrifying efficiency. Riggs barely had time to shove Emily to the ground before a grenade rolled toward them, its pin already pulled. In that frozen second before detonation, Emily screamed something that cut through the noise. Asterisk. "It's in the water." Asterisk. And suddenly, the key in her pocket made horrifying sense. The warehouse, the bodies, the hospital bracelet. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a distribution network. Someone had weaponized Mercy General's supply chain, tainting 4 bags, syringes, even the damn drinking fountains with something far worse than drugs. And Emily's brother? He hadn't just stumbled onto it. He'd helped design it. The crash that supposedly killed him 10 years ago? That was the day he'd refused to keep working on Project Black Tide, a bioweapon disguised as a flu vaccine. The same project Jason's unit had been secretly deployed to protect. Riggs grabbed the grenade and hurled it back toward the SUVs just as it detonated, the blast wave knocking him into Emily. Shrapnel tore through the air, and when the smoke cleared, Jason was gone, dragged into the trees by one of the new attackers. But the real horror was the insignia on their sleeves, a twisted caduceus, the same symbol from the warehouse. These weren't feds. They weren't even military. They were pharmaceutical contractors, hired guns working for the largest drug manufacturer in the country, the company that just so happened to supply 80% of Mercy General's medications. Lena sprinted toward them, her left arm bleeding from a graze. "They're scrubbing the hospital right now," she panted. "Every nurse who worked last shift is being detained. They're calling it a quarantine, but—" A bullet whizzed past her head, cutting her off. The surviving SUV peeled out, its gunner spraying suppressing fire. Emily yanked the trunk release, revealing her brother's corpse and the hollowed-out cavity where his spleen should have been. "Surgically removed. Asterisk post-mortem. They took the neutralizing agent from his body," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. "He was the only one who knew the formula. Without it, everyone who got treated today." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Riggs' mind flashed to the crowded ER he'd walked past yesterday, the coughing kids, the elderly patients hooked to IVs, the overworked nurses administering what they thought was medicine. Then his radio crackled to life with the captain's voice, calm, paternal, the same tone he'd used when teaching Riggs how to shoot. Asterisk Daniel. "You're compromised. Stand down and we'll extract you. This is bigger than her. Bigger than you." Asterisk the betrayal was so complete, it barely registered as pain. The captain hadn't just sold them out. He'd orchestrated it. A new sound cut through the gunfire, the whump of helicopter blades. Not police. Not news. A private medevac with the same twisted Caduceus logo painted on its belly. It circled once, then opened fire with mounted turrets, shredding the pavement in a straight line toward them. Riggs grabbed Emily's hand. The key wasn't just a key. It was a failsafe. Her brother had hidden it in his boot because he knew, he knew they'd come for his body. And now, as the chopper descended like some mechanized vulture, Riggs finally understood the choice ahead. Run and let thousands die. Or storm the warehouse where Black Tide was being loaded into ambulances and face the man who'd raised him. The captain wasn't just involved. He was the architect. The warehouse loomed ahead like a tomb, its rusted gates hanging open, a silent invitation to the nightmare inside. Riggs could hear the helicopters closing in behind them, their searchlights slicing through the pre-dawn fog, but there was no turning back now. Emily's brother had died for whatever was hidden in this place, and if they didn't stop it before sunrise, thousands more would follow. The key burned in Emily's palm as they sprinted past overturned barrels of chemicals, the air thick with the acrid stench of bleach and something fouler, something metallic, like old blood. Then they saw them. Rows upon rows of unmarked ambulances, their engines idling, each one loaded with enough tainted medical supplies to wipe out an entire city block. Lena was the first to spot the captain standing on the catwalk above, his silhouette framed against the glow of a computer bank. He wasn't alone. Jason knelt at his feet, battered but alive, a gun pressed to his temple by a figure in a lab coat, Dr. Voss, Mercy General's chief of medicine. The man Emily had trusted for years. The man who'd signed off on every shipment, every trial, every death. "You were supposed to die on that highway," the captain called down, his voice almost sorrowful. "Like your father did." The words hit Riggs like a sledgehammer. His father's accident 10 years ago, the faulty brakes, the charred patrol car, hadn't been an accident at all. He'd uncovered Black Tide first. And the captain, his mentor, his family, had ordered the hit. Emily didn't hesitate. She lunged for the nearest ambulance, her fingers flying over the keypad on its onboard drug fridge. The key wasn't just a physical object, it was a cipher, the last piece of the code her brother had embedded in the hospital's database. The screen flickered to life, revealing a countdown. 00:07:32. 7 minutes until the first ambulances deployed on their humanitarian missions, spreading death instead of mercy. But before she could input the kill code, Dr. Voss's laughter echoed through the warehouse. "You really think it's that simple?" he sneered. "The real delivery system isn't the ambulances.
It's you."
Then Riggs saw it, the faint rash creeping up Emily's neck. The dizziness she'd blamed on adrenaline, the fever she'd ignored. She wasn't just carrying the key. She'd been infected, patient zero in a plague designed to look like a natural outbreak. That's why they'd let her run. That's why the captain hadn't shot them on sight. They didn't need ambulances if their weapon could walk right into emergency rooms on its own. Jason suddenly twisted free, tackling Dr. Voss over the railing. They hit the concrete with a sickening crunch, but it was too late. The countdown hit 00:05:00, and the warehouse doors began sealing shut, not to keep them in, but to keep the world out. The captain raised his pistol, not at Riggs, but at the exposed canisters above them. "I'm sorry, son," he said and fired. The explosion blew out the ceiling, sending a mushroom cloud of black tide into the dawn sky. Riggs grabbed Emily as the roof caved in, shielding her with his body as the world dissolved into chaos. But the real gut punch came next, the screech of tires outside, the sound of reinforcements arriving. Not the cartel. Not the feds. News vans, live cameras filmed the chemical fire as men in hazmat suits, the same contractors who'd tried to kill them, staged a heroic containment. The narrative was already spinning. A tragic accident. A brave response. Nothing to see here. And then, as the smoke cleared, Riggs saw the final twist. The one thing that made the whole horrific puzzle click into place. Stamped on the inside of a hazmat helmet, barely visible through the ash, was the logo of the company that owned the warehouse, the ambulances, even Mercy General. The same company the captain had quietly taken stock options in for years. The same company that would make billions from the vaccine they'd conveniently developed for a disease they'd just released. Emily's hand found his in the rubble. She was sweating now, her pupils dilated, but her grip was iron. "The code," she whispered. "It's not just a kill switch. It's a broadcast." Her brother had rigged the hospital servers to dump every dirty secret, every email, every corpse buried in this operation onto the dark web, but only if someone entered the final sequence from inside the warehouse. From the heart of the beast. Riggs looked at the terminal across the room, then at the armed men between them and it. At Jason, bleeding out on the floor. At Emily, dying in his arms. At the cameras rolling just outside, ready to sell the lie. The countdown hit 00:00:30. He made his choice. Riggs dragged Emily toward the terminal as gunfire erupted around them, each step feeling like it could be their last. The countdown hit 00:00:10 as he slammed the key into the port, her trembling fingers inputting the final sequence, her brother's birthday, the day he'd supposedly died. The screen flashed red, then black, before exploding into a cascade of documents, videos, and encrypted files. Years of evidence spilling into the world in an unstoppable wave. The truth wasn't just leaking anymore. It was a flood, and somewhere out there, hackers, journalists, and every conspiracy theorist with an internet connection were already digging. The system's final message blinked ominously. Broadcast initiated. No stopping it now. The captain's scream of rage was drowned out by the roar of the news helicopters outside, their cameras now capturing the hazmat teams for what they really were, armed mercenaries scrambling to contain a truth they could no longer control. Jason, bleeding but alive, seized a fallen rifle and fired at the remaining canisters, triggering a secondary explosion that sent the warehouse doors buckling inward. The blast gave Riggs and Emily just enough cover to stumble into the chaos outside, where the world was already erupting into panic. Phones buzzed with emergency alerts as the first leaked documents hit social media, video confessions, shipping manifests, even the captain's own voice ordering Riggs' father's murder. By sunrise, #BlackTide was trending globally, and the company's stock had plummeted to zero. But victory came at a cost. Emily collapsed in the parking lot, her skin burning with fever, her breath shallow. Riggs held her as the first real medics, not contractors, but terrified EMTs who just realized what they'd been unwittingly aiding, rushed toward them. She gripped his arm with fading strength, her lips forming words he had to strain to hear. Asterisk, the cure was in the key. Asterisk, the realization hit him like a lightning strike. Her brother hadn't just hidden evidence, he'd hidden the antidote's formula in the key's encryption. The very thing the company had killed to suppress was now in the hands of millions. 3 days later, Riggs stood at a graveside, not Emily's, she'd pulled through, Barely, her immunity the only reason she'd survived the weaponized strain, but his father's. The headstone had been freshly cleaned, the truth chiseled into it at last. Jason, his arm in a sling, stood beside him, both men staring at the distant news vans still camped outside the cemetery. The world was on fire with scandal, arrests, and congressional hearings, but the fight wasn't over. The company's CEO had resigned. The captain was in custody, though his connections meant he'd likely never see a prison cell, and somewhere in a lab halfway across the country, scientists were racing to mass-produce the cure from Emily's brother's files. As Riggs turned to leave, a shadow moved by the cemetery gates, a figure in a hoodie, the same one from the hospital's security footage. Jake Tolbert, the disgraced orderly, met his gaze just long enough to drop a flash drive into the grass before vanishing. Later, in the privacy of his car, Riggs would plug it in and find a single video file, a recorded confession from Dr. Voss, made hours before the warehouse explosion, naming names even the leaks hadn't uncovered. "It goes all the way to the top," the doctor whispered, his face gaunt with fear. Asterisk, and they'll burn the world to keep it quiet. The screen went dark. The engine turned over. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Riggs pulled onto the highway, the weight of the truth heavy in his pocket. The battle might have been won, but the war was just beginning. And this time, they wouldn't be fighting in the shadows. Cut to black. Silence. Then the faintest sound, a heartbeat monitor, steady and strong. A hospital room. Emily's hand, twitching awake. And on the TV in the corner, a news ticker scrolling endlessly. Breaking. Second whistleblower comes forward. Black tide linked to overseas trials. Death toll rising. Stay tuned. Fade out. The end?